Are we live?
Yeah.
This is working. Ooh. All right. So I see that some are still getting connected. So tonight, man, we have been getting hammered, literally hammered, with so many people coming up with some of the most off the wall stuff, trying to convince us that that's what they needed. And hey, I get it. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to break it down, and we're going to see what does it cost. I mean, simple, right? What do you think, Joe?
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like chicken math, right? How many do you have? Well, I don't know, a dozen or so. Yeah, like 100 and a dozen or so. But anyway,
You know, I've asked people if they could help, like when they ask for help, like, well, how many are we feeding? So I could tell you about, mixing and stuff like that. I don't know. And I'm like, okay, so what can we help you with? I just want to save money. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Me too. Be careful though, because that's going to run you down a rabbit hole. But everybody says they want to save money. But what we have found in listening, because when people say my birds are doing this, what do you think's wrong? What's the first question you ask them, Jeff?
what are you feeding?
What are you feeding? And I want to see the feed tag, how you're mixing it. We're not going to share what you're mixing because we don't care what the guy down the street, we don't care about none of that. We're not going to share your secret blend, but we need to know that information because we need to be able to calculate the actual numbers. Because, I think until a show we did a few weeks back, when people was like, well, hey, I mixed this, 3 bags of this and 1 bag of that. What's my protein level and what's my amino acid level? So, I broke out my calculator and Jeff broke out his brain and we started calculating stuff for people. And I think that one individual actually saw what his problem was himself, didn't have to point it out. So that was pretty good. But tonight we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what is the real cost of your feed. And if you have any comments, questions, or anything like that, feel free to chime in. Does that sound good, Jeff?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you don't like what we're saying, tell us. I don't care.
And hey, look, if you're curious or if you want to know yourself or if you think we're full of it, please tell us because we're lifelong learners. We want to know as much as we can. And if you have some kind of research to back up something different, by all means, let us see it. But this isn't,
and I ain't talking about university or scientific research, but if you can prove this, if you can prove something to me, look, the older I get, the more I realize how little I actually know, right? So I learn something new every day. And I ain't afraid to admit it. I don't know everything. Hell, I ain't gonna know anything when they put me in the ground. So I'm not gonna know everything when they put me in the ground.
but I mean, trying. So tonight, what I'm going to do is I'm working on right now changing everything up. Hey, George. Happy Tuesday morning. Let's see. We are going to switch here.
Oh,
hey, I got pictures.
All right.
Because, you know, a lot of people are visual. They need to see it.
All right.
Can y'all see that? Let's see.
They don't
here.
want to see it. Yeah. Zoom it in.
Yep.
Make her bigger.
All right. So, Jeff, you put together this calculation.
Look, I put this together just quick this afternoon. Here's the thing. This is what I hear, right? So, you know, most of the guys are telling me what they got in their area is $25, give or take $1 or $2, right? It's just a ballpark number. There's still a handful of people that are able to find some floor sweepings and shit for $18. You know, but a really good feed is going to be $35 to $40, right? So here's the thing, right? Is everybody to maintain the body weights and, you know, what they think, you know, keep their birds from starving to death on the shit feed, the cheap shit, right? They tell me they're feeding about 4.5 ounces, right? And then guys that are feeding a regular feed, you know, like an all flock, whether it's Combat, Nutrino, Purina, whatever, you know, that's in that $25, $27 range. Feeding about 3.5 ounces. Now, look, this is guys anywhere from Texas to Canada, right? And anywhere in between. So,
Shit, some of those places is even more.
Right. But the average amount that I'm hearing is about 3.5 ounces of what would be considered a better local feed, right? And then, like, you know, with Kerry, you know, when I finally got him switched over to feeding what we would consider a premium feed, where you don't have to mix anything, right? You're not putting any oil, you're not putting in any Rapido or any type of breeder supplement, right? Nothing, right? You just feeding it. Maintain good body weight, good activity levels. You're feeding about 2.5 ounces. So when I look at what you're actually feeding cost per bird per day, everybody looks at the damn price of the bag, right? And they have no clue.
Ooh, look at this.
Yeah.
Elijah says $46 a bag for high octane in Hawaii.
Yeah. Yeah. Till they ship it, till they ship it down from leeches in California and get it to Hawaii and move it around. Yeah. I can believe that.
That's made there.
So, you know, guys, you got to figure out. So, in a 50-pound bag, there's 800 ounces, right? So, if you need help with the math, and I like math, you know, I can help you. But here's the thing: this is what it takes. Like when I got Kerry to break over to feeding like a 30, actually, it's only $28 or $30 in Alabama for a good premium feed. Everything's in it, right? So it'd be even less than this. He's only going to be about 1 cent per bird per day, you know, to get it in different places. I used $40 a bag as an average, right? You're 2.5 cents per bird per day, right? So it got 100 birds. That's $2.40 a day. And I realize it adds up. What isn't in here, like if you're using a regular feed, and Kerry's going to show you some numbers in a little bit, but like you add Rapido to that, well, you know, Rapido's costing you 2.5 cents per bird per day. That doesn't even cover, you know, the cost of the oil, right? And good oil isn't cheap. And if you're using like the really cheap shit feed, if you're under $20, you know, you can wear the hat. I feed cheap shit. Okay, that's fine. You can do that. But the amount of catfish food and the amount of Rapido or supplement or the amount of oil and about, you know, the other stuff that you're going to have to add to it is you know, you're going to be way over that 2 or 3 cents that you thought you were saving. Right? But
So Jason and I, we've had a couple of conversations about feed and incubators and stuff. He says 18 US is about 16,000 Canadian. Their shit feed is $23 Canadian, and they have no good stuff.
no, they don't.
And you know, we both looked at a lot of stuff from Canada, and it's definitely tough there.
It is, and it doesn't matter. It's coast to coast in Canada, the same as it is here in the U.S. Right? There's pockets. There's these little small pockets where you can actually get a really good feed. And the same thing is here. You know, same thing's true in the U.S. Right? There's only like 3 or 4 manufacturers who can make you a really, truly. I don't need to add anything to it. You know, Gamefowl feed, and you can just feed it and forget it and just move on, and everything's going to click. But
when they do that, they're dusty.
You know, the chicken don't give a shit. It's just the person feeding it. I mean, the chicken don't give 2 rats' asses how much dust is on that feed, and you got to feed in a cup. You can't feed it on the ground because you're going to give it all away. But if you're not feeding in a cup, then this is not the show for you, right? If you are feeding on the ground, you might as well just turn off your computer or your phone, go somewhere else, go sit in the corner and play with yourself or something, because this is not where you want to be. Because we're pretty hard on ground feeders. Right?
And you know, people say, "Oh, well, they eat bugs off the ground." Well, yeah, they do, but it's also usually when they're free ranging and not walking around in a toilet.
Yeah, they're not on a tie cord. They're not in a breeding pen. They're not in a tie cord. They're not in a scratch pen. They're not in a drop pen. Okay. The reason that we free range those chicks from about 5 weeks old to 6 months old, if you can get that much out of them, is so they can go find, worms and beetles and bugs and whatever, right? And makes a huge difference in how they grow and they develop. They get better muscle tone. They fill out a lot nicer. They don't put on fat, right? So anyway.
It also lets you see who's got vigor.
Yeah.
That, to me, free-ranging chickens, especially if you're in the South, is a really good way to get rid of the idiots.
Well, it also shows you who's got the strongest personality, right?
Yeah, the one that survives. Because we've got raccoons that will actually try to crawl out on a limb while a chicken's sleeping on the limb to try to have it for dinner.
Well, yeah, man. Everybody likes chicken dinner. Come on.
I mean, yeah.
So look, guys, you can feed a better feed. While the price per bag looks really horrible, okay, because there's like a $7 jump from cheap shit feed to, better local feed. And it's even worse, right? You got a $22 jump going from shit feed to, a premium feed, right? But at the end of the day, it's like 1 cent to feed a better local feed. It's 2.5 cents to feed a premium feed. You don't have to mix anything. You don't have to get your hand down in there with a bunch of oil and stinky fish meal and stuff like that. And so anyway, I mean, it's up to you. It's your money, right?
That's right. So tell me this. Why do people still use cheap feed? Like, what's the biggest reason?
Look, Kerry, I've been working on feeding chickens now for 30 years. Okay. And in that 30 years, I swear to God, everybody looks at a bag of feed and they think all feed is created equal, right? And they look at it, oh, that's 16%, that's 16%, that's 16%. Oh, this one's $16 and this one's $18 and this one's $20. Well, I'm going to buy the $16 one. They're all the same. Well, if that's all the further you can see is the protein and the price, and your chances of having premium chickens on your yard are pretty slim. Okay, that just
All right, so Elijah tosses out a question. What if I'm ground feeding once in a while in a pen with horse manure?
I don't know what it is about horse manure, and I don't know that all horse manure is created equal, but I have seen birds in a scratch pen or in a stall where they've had access to older horse manure,
Mm-hmm.
and they do look clean for some reason, right? That there's something about those birds. They got a little bit better vigor or something, right? And their general appearance is they're healthier. So I'd still rather you're not feeding on the ground, Elijah. Okay, that you're gambling, and everybody in watching tonight is a gambler anyway. I know that, but you know, I don't know what the value of your birds is, but if you're looking at, a 3, 5, or $1,000 bird, I don't want to gamble with that. Okay, so
Mm-mm.
we got huge investments in our birds, but yet we won't make the investment in the feed. So I don't know. But there's some truth to that horse manure thing, and I don't understand it yet. So I'm not going to pretend I understand it. But the birds that I've seen that have had some aged horse manure, not fresh, got a little age on it, let it dry out a little bit. They really do look clean, and I just don't know what makes the difference. I really don't, and I don't know if it's certain insects that are attracted to the horse manure. Because I don't, I didn't actually see the chickens eating the horse manure itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I really don't know. I'm learning. But I said at the beginning of the show, I don't know everything, so I'm still learning. But I wouldn't feed it on the ground. So
All right, so we have another question real quick.
okay,
What do you guys think about blue bonnet feed?
10 years ago, I would have told you Blue Bonnet actually had a few pretty decent feeds out there. I don't know this, but it appears as though with some of the cost cutting and ingredient purchasing and things like that that's going on at Blue Bonnet, it almost feels like Blue Bonnet was sold out and the new owners are trying to milk it for profit. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just saying I've seen this before when a company gets bought out and the new owners just want to rape it for money. They start cutting corners, and it's just got that feeling. Like 10 years ago, I saw some really good Blue Bonnet, and birds were performing on it. I mean, they looked good, right? They were healthy. They looked good. And I think the old or the previous owners or whoever was in charge of Blue Bonnet 10 years ago bought high quality grains, paid attention to what they were buying, put together some decent mixes. I still didn't like the way they were formulated because I thought that there were too much energy and they'd put too much fat on a bird. But the quality was better, 8 or 10 years ago.
So
It's
I
really going
just,
downhill.
yeah, I just so happened blue bonnet because I collect feed tags. I got an Excel spreadsheet that's got starter, layer, conditioner on it, and I collect feed tags from just about anyone that somebody sends me. If it's a company that's widely available, I add it to this spreadsheet. All right, so last blue bonnet breeder feed tag I got had a 20% protein. And if you look at it right off the top, hey, that's great. Then you look at their fat, 2.5%. The fiber is 7.9, which is way different.
Yeah.
Calcium is at 3. The vitamin A is about half of what it should be. Well, a little over half. It's at 4,500 international units a pound. 7,000 to 8,000 will be a lot better. Vitamin D, it's coming in about half where it needs to be at 1,100 international units per pound. Should be closer to 2,000, 2,500. And the vitamin E is only 20, and it should be at least 50, closer to 100. So the lysines 0.9 should be 1.2. Methionine was 0.4, which that is a number. Okay, so there's two numbers that I can live with, the protein and the methionine. Wouldn't you agree, Jeff?
Just barely live with that methionine level. That is the bottom.
But at least it hit the minimum on that.
Right.
So there's that, and then the conditioner protein level is at like 16%. The fat is 3. The fiber is 6. Now I thought this was kind of funny that the vitamin A was at 4,000. The vitamin D was at 1,000. Vitamin E was at 20. Almost identical. And then you hit the lysine, and this is in a conditioner feed, 0.7. Methionine is 0.23. I mean, that's...
So when I started, okay, when I started working with the Gamefowl and the breeder folks, the Blue Bonnet conditioner was 18%, and it was a full 1% on lysine, and it was a little over 0.4 on methionine. Okay. So like I said, they're diluting it down, and they don't think anybody really is paying attention. And most people aren't, right? Most people listening to the show are not paying attention to this, but I'm paying attention to it, but that's what I do, right? That's, just as much as you guys pay attention to your birds, I pay attention to feed tags and what's in them, right? And then looking down through the ingredients and see what's in there, and how much of it's bullshit and how much of it's good. And
I mean, Jeff, let's be honest, man. If 10, 15 years ago, this was a great feed, and the only thing that's just changed noticeably over the years is a prettier bag, and the prices went up. Well, in your mind, you would think, well, it's inflation. Everything else has went up. So, I mean, you don't think to compare it again.
No, I mean, you don't. And okay, so same thing with All Flock, right? The Nutritional NatureWise All Flock. 10 years ago, I was recommending that. It was 20%. It had a 1%. It had a 1% lysine. It had a 0.4 methionine, right? And decent vitamin A, D, and E levels. Not where I want them, but they were above many of the competitors. And it was a decent feed. You look at a Nutritional NatureWise All Flock now, it's 0.85 lysine, 0.37 methionine, right? And they're diluting it down as well. Yeah. So, prices go up, quality goes down. They got to make their profits. The stockholders want to get paid their dividends, right? So that's more important than the quality they're putting on the shelf, and they don't think anybody's going to buy it if the price goes up too much. So anyway, it's just a game.
Little here, little there. All right, so
we do got some questions. So whenever you're ready.
I do want to say this. I think I figured out the horse manure thing.
Okay.
All right, so a horse eats whole grains, and like us, their body don't process them all.
Yeah.
So it comes out in their excrement. You let it dry out, toss it in your chicken pen with your roosters, and they know there's food in it, so they scratch and they paw and they get their legs busy. So I think they're essentially digging in horse crap for feed, and building up some muscle.
They are, and because we do agronomy work, at Fertrell as well, right? So horse manure typically runs about 4 to 5% nitrogen. Well, 4% nitrogen is 25 protein. Okay, because the horse isn't getting everything out of the hay and the grain that it's eating.
Right.
So, you actually have the horse manure is higher in protein than most of the feeds that guys are feeding. So, that's also going to slick them up and lean them out. So they probably are eating the horse manure, just to get a little bit more nutrition. But anyway.
So you're feeding them crap to give them crap. Cool. Cool. All right. Sean says, I am using the perfect chick starter and I'm wondering what feed to use next. The conditioner or the layer breeder?
Yeah. Sean, you want to go 8 weeks on the starter and then you want to switch over to the 18% conditioner. You're going to be on that another 8 to 10 weeks, probably till you see the first egg come out.
Mm-hmm.
And then you switch over. You never go to a layer feed until you see the first egg arrive, right? You don't want to go to layer too early and second guess your birds, and because loading up too much calcium in them, reduces kidney function. But we can talk about that on a whole other show. But Sean, I want to know, how did you like the chick starter? So put it in the comments. I want to know I want your feedback, on that chick starter.
Hey, I got to tell you this. I got some feedback on the conditioner. So this guy, I'm not going to say who he is, but he said he knows he has 400 roosters on the ground because that's how many barrels he has. And all the tie cords are full. So got a lot of roosters. And he's good. He actually feeds his roosters grit. And so he's like, they have a water cup, a grit cup, and a feed cup. All of them have 3 cups. Like, hey, man, you got my attention already, buddy. And so he switches over. He orders a little bit of the conditioner because, a lot of people are like, oh, it's a coarse mesh. I don't know, my birds won't like it, whatever. So he did that, and he started mixing it with the pellets and took about a 2-week period to swap them over totally. And the next time he orders feed, he ordered some grit, like 300 pounds of it. I said, are you sure you need 300 pounds? Yeah, I got a lot of birds, this, that, and the other. So I'm thinking, okay, this guy's giving his premium roosters one feed and like an all flock to the others or his hens or whatever. He needs some grit. Boom. All right. I'll put it on your next pallet. There it goes. Then about 3 or 4 weeks goes by and he says, hey man, I think something's wrong with my roosters. I said, what's going on, bud? And he goes, they're not touching the grit. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, like I fill up the grit cups every week and normally they would be a little low after a week. So we, just put more in there. I said, well, what are they eating? He said, they're eating your food. I said, oh, it's got grit in the bag. That's why they're not eating it out of the cup. It's in the feed already. Because, the chick starter, they all have the appropriate size grit in it. So it makes it more complete, so on and so forth. But I thought I would throw that out there. If you're using that feed and you're not seeing a lot of grit disappear, that's why. Jimmy said, the ones that didn't want to improve their feed are not as competitive as the ones that do. I will agree with that too. I mean, because, to me, if you're going to ask your bird to do a lot and you love your birds and you want to take care of your birds, you're only going to want the best. Like I literally had a guy say to me today, I only want the best for my birds. I'm like, okay. Our feed main ingredients are wheat, barley, green peas, milo, sorghum, sunflower seeds, whole corn.
Safflower seeds, whole corn, and pellets.
Yeah.
18%. Yeah.
As a maintenance feed. Ain't that bad. I mean, I like the fact that it has wheat and barley in it.
So that tells a little bit of peas are all right, and Milo's fine.
Probably up north.
But when I see, no, this could be California, this could be anywhere, right? So, look, when they're putting all these different grains in there, they're doing it more for you because you think it looks good than they are for the chicken, right? And your chicken's going to eat it like crazy because it looks like wild bird feed with a pellet in it. And, but to make that pellet, you got to use a byproduct. Okay, that you cannot make a pellet without bullshit. So just there ain't no way around it, right? It is impossible to make a pellet without wheat middlings or some form of byproduct. I just be curious, Sheldon. Sheldon Farms. Hey, what's the amino acid levels? I don't care. The protein is not what we live and die by. It's those amino acids and those vitamin levels, right? So those are the numbers that are going to matter to me.
I mean, like you told me before that you could do better with a 16% protein if the vitamins and amino acids were where they should be than you could with a 19 or 20% protein.
Dude, I could make you a 14% feed and jack up the amino acids and the vitamins, and you'd swear to God you're feeding at 20%. I can run the amino acids up and balance everything out, right? If I've got good probiotics, I got good amino acids, I got great vitamin levels, I can run them on a 14%, and you'd swear to God you could put it up against anybody's 20% out there on the market, and I'll kick the shit out of it, okay? And no doubt.
Apparently, it's the benefits of excess vitamins that the horse hasn't absorbed, which also passes the horses. Yep, that's it. Let's see. Dr. Fabio. Ooh, I ain't going to mess up that last one. Has a good explanation. Oh, that was it. All right.
Yeah.
Let's see. Sheldon's Farm says $36 for a 75-pound bag.
Yeah, that's that TMC shit we were looking at earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The amino acids on that TMC 75-pound Gamefowl conditioner feed are not good. So, but the birds eat it like crazy. They eat it like crazy.
See, they look great and they're very attractive and healthy. The chicks eat it up. That's great. I swear my birds act like they choke when I tried feeding in cups. Gave it a good try. I've never heard other people have this problem.
Yeah.
That is kind of weird.
It is a transition thing. And, I don't know the cup height. Keeping the lip of that cup level with the bird's backs. I've been on yards where the cups are too high and the bird has to stretch just a little bit too much to eat. So the edge of the cup or the lip of the cup needs to be level with the bird's back, not higher, not lower. Okay. That could be part of it, but yeah. But I think the birds feel a little bit more competition too when they're standing up and eating out of a cup. So, they might be eating faster than they need to, thinking that, they got to get it all down before somebody gets it. But
And I mean, some people do that because, they should all clean it up in 10 minutes, right?
that's what people believe. So,
But I mean, the way I look at it, if you're feeding a proper balanced feed and you're not overfeeding, it shouldn't matter if it takes 30 minutes or if they finish it off for breakfast the next day.
I'll tell you what, for Gamefowl owners, it's important for them to clean them cups up within 10 minutes or less. So,
I've been feeding chickens for 50 years, second generation cocker. Jeff's formula are giving me better results than
he's
ever
mixing
before.
it right. And he's mixing it right on, right at his place, right? It's like cracked corn, whole oats, a little bit of barley, roasted soybeans, a little bit of fish meal. So
The whole shebang.
It ain't hard, right? Yeah. You can buy all the ingredients somewhere, and and mix it. If you're going to be mixing something, you might as well be mixing it right?
I was going to say, a lot of people look at these numbers and they're like, well, let's say you are wanting to get cheap. Well, if you're wanting to get cheap, then look at buying the grains and making it yourself. I mean,
I don't know. I don't think it really saves you anything, but they're going to eat less. When you start looking at feeding 2 ounces less per bird, that shit adds up. Right. And
so I can tell you from experience that you will not save time making your own feed. But making it yourself, what goes in your birds. The birds didn't get any crap that they shouldn't have. And when they're eating just grains and minerals and stuff, they're not. I mean, heck, they don't even crap as much. And it's that good, rich, green, some of y'all know what I'm talking about when you grab it and you throw it up against the wall and you see just enough to make that imprint and it sticks for like a second and then it falls. That time frame, mine are like that pretty much all the time. But it's because they don't have a whole lot of extra crap in their feed. Here's one for you. What about feeding once or twice a day? Any preference? And I'll even throw in why.
I personally like twice a day. I like to feed 1/3 in the morning, 2/3 in the afternoon. That is my preference. And the reason is when they go to roost or when they go to sleep at night, they actually get more out of what they're eating and they will be healthier going to bed with a full belly. Okay. Full crop, full gizzard, whatever. Right. So that is the best results I've ever seen. Now, if you want to give them a little bit in the morning just to keep them going through the day, fine. But I kind of like twice a day, little in the morning and the bulk of it in the late afternoon. And that works the best, in my opinion.
So one thing that I've seen people do is 2 tablespoons is 1 ounce. For those of y'all that don't know, and you can get 1 ounce scoops. Amazon, any cooking supply store, whatever. And hey, you dump one in the cup in the morning, run through there, dump them out, go to work, come home, go visit your birds again and give them 2. That way they get to go to bed with a full belly.
Yeah. They really do look better when you do that. I'm not sure why, but yeah.
Is there a chart we can go by for the perfect feed? Jeff, you love charts.
I don't understand. I mean, as far as how much to feed. I don't know what chart as far as, the perfect feed formulas that I put out there for people to look at, you know, um, during the starter and the grower phases when they're building body and growing. I don't hold them back, so it's whatever they'll clean up. I don't start limiting feed till they hit about 16 weeks old. Um, as far as yeah, so he said, for protein levels and stuff. So, John, I, I honestly like a really good 22%, give or take one. The more important numbers are like I need the lysine to be 1.2, 1.2, 1.3. I want the methionine to be 0.55. If you can find out what it is, I want the threonine level to be zero point 0.8. I want the fat to be at least 5. 6 is better. And I want the fiber to be at least 5. And I want no bullshit in the ingredients. Okay. So, grower feed, I'm dropping down to a 19. I need a 1.2, 1.1, 1.2 lysine, 0.52 methionine, 0.75 threonine, again, 6% fat, 5% fiber. And then if you're going to do a developer, it's actually 17 with a 1.1 lysine, a 0.5 methionine, 0.73, 0.74 threonine. Again, 6% fat, 5% fiber. So the amino acids are more important to me than the protein is. So that's the key factors. But not a chart, but I can make one if you need one. Just remind me. Shoot me a message.
John, I'll say this. If the ink pen you grabbed when he started rattling that off didn't work like what usually happens to me when I grab an ink pen, go back to the video at minute number 40 and pick up there. and that's where you'll get to hear it again, and you can even hit pause because he talks kind of fast sometimes. I think that's the Yankee in him.
You want me to write it down? Look, I'm pulling this out of memory, man. So this isn't like I'm sitting here reading it. So
in Canada, it takes a bit of an elbow grease, not to mix, but to arm wrestle the actual ingredients added out of the mills so you can do the math. Their tags are god awful.
They are. And we're just not used to them being done in kilograms, but at least they give you actuals, right? So most of the feeds, they're not necessarily too cheap on their vitamins because they're either 10 or 12,000 vitamin A per kilogram. So they're not horrible. They're actually slightly above the US, but they fall short on adding amino acids up there. And they love using their damn canola meal, and they don't get the fat levels where we want them to be. So majority of the time. But, let's see where you at. So you already answered Jesse. What did we miss? Anything?
Are these feed ingredients good for maintenance? Wheat, barley, milo, sorghum, sunflower seeds, safflower seeds, whole corn, and pellets.
Right. So that TMC Gamefowl 18% conditioner is probably an okay maintenance feed. The only thing I'm worried about with that list of ingredients is it's going to be fairly high in energy. So you need to watch and feel for fat on them, right? I got a feeling that they're going to get fat on you. If you give them as much as they want, or just be careful. That formula to me is going to put fat on a bird, and I'm not a big fan of extra fat on Gamefowl. So that's just my 2 cents worth, right? I'm not a safflower or sunflower guy. I like the wheat, barley, green peas, and milo in there. So I do like those. I wish I knew more about what was in their pellet. And I looked at the tag. Actually, I looked at that label today, and it's not a legal label, right? It doesn't have the lysine or the methionine on it. It doesn't have the salt. It doesn't have the calcium. It doesn't have the amino acids. It's not even, a legal label, right? And if I wanted to be, the worst prick ever, I'd call California Department of Ag. Of course, they have nobody to take care of it, but and say, look,
That's because
this
they're
isn't.
outside counting people's chickens to see how many roosters they got.
Yeah, right. They're sitting in cars with binoculars, and they're keeping track of
Oh, you
how
got
many
more than
roosters.
3 roosters.
Yeah. Anyway, don't get started.
Tell me this. A lot of people, the way the economy is, they're trying to save money, and I get it. Is a commercial breeder supplement expensive? Like,
Well,
okay, everybody knows what this product costs, but what is it when you break it down per bird per day? What are we talking here?
isn't it like 2.5 cents per bird per day? So I mean, it adds up, right? So if you got 100 birds, that's $2.30 a day. You're talking about, or $2.60 a day.
0.298.
All right. So basically 3 cents for every 100 birds. That's $3. And then, that's $90 a month. So, but, look, there's guys buying Kickin' Chicken and Rooster Booster and Slippery Spur. No, it's not Slippery Spur, whatever. Super Spur and
Save a
Red
chick.
Cell and Save a Chick is just pissing away money. I don't care who you are. Save a Chick is just pissing away money. But anyway.
Oh,
Well,
let's see.
you asked.
Yeah, I did. Is it any cheaper to buy multiple supplements? Like can I go buy a 50-pound bag of lysine, a 50-pound bag of methionine, and a 50-pound bag of threonine, and run the risk of not storing it properly and all that good stuff?
You can do all that, right? I mean, you can absolutely do that. Now, I don't know, I don't know what you get paid per hour or what your value is, per hour of your time. But I don't want to give up the time, right? I don't want to give up that time. I don't know. I reach an age where I feel it's better to pay a professional to help me than it is for me to do like a plumbing job that takes all day, right? And somebody who knows what they're doing comes in and does it in an hour, right? So do I want to give up all day to save a nickel, or do I want to have that day to myself? That's how I break it down to me. So, hey, when I was young and dumb and I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, then I'd waste all day on Saturday, fixing a plumbing problem. But I'm not there anymore. So, but, trying to add multiple supplements and figure it out on your own is, man, that's tough. That is really tough. But you can do it. Anybody can do it.
I'll say this. If you have a $3,000 pellet machine, you can make pellets 200 pounds in an hour. So that gives you a breakdown of just pelletizing a week's worth of feed. That's going to take you at least an hour if you got a $3,000 machine. If you have a slower machine, it's going to take longer. So, yeah.
But you know what? Just hold on a second, because I'm going to tell you one of the best gamefowl one of the best gamefowl men that I know has broke down and bought like the 20 horse diesel or the 30 horse diesel model He makes his own pellets about once a month. Then he mixes his grains with it, makes his own feed. And he has got some of the most phenomenal, healthy game fowl I have ever seen in my life. Right. I'd put him right up against anybody that I know. So,
I mean, and I can believe that.
if you're going to
But
make the investment, do it right. Don't
yeah,
throw a bunch of shit together, and think you got game fowl feed. I mean, he's buying cracked corn, he's buying the Milo, he's buying the wheat and the barley, and he makes the pellet. Pellet is only about 25 to 30% of the total mix. The rest is grains, right? He's adding oil to it, shines it up nice, gets the birds where they need to be, and I mean, it's good looking feed.
but I mean, let's be honest. I can just buy cheap feed and put a lot of supplement in it, and it'll make it good feed, right?
No, no, you just, man, you're putting you're just putting a band-aid on a bullet wound. It don't work that way, right? It's just not. Yes,
What happens if you
you can
try?
make cheap feed. You can make cheap feed better, right? You can make regular feed better, but they're never going to be as good as a top shelf feed, right? It's just never going to be quite the same.
So, what are
So
some of the health risks to my birds if I throw in more vitamins because more is better? Like, if that's my mentality, more is
yeah,
better. What's the risk that go along with it?
well, all the vitamins can be toxic as well. So if you're not doing it by math and you're not going for specific numbers, if you're not trying to hit that 7 or 8,000 on vitamin A, you're not trying to hit, if you don't do the math to get to 2,500 on vitamin D, or 100 on vitamin E, or right, all of those you get out of whack can actually be toxic and go the other direction. And the early signs of this is you're going to get excited because your bird's going to have this twitchy high energy level right before it crashes. Okay. You're going to think you're doing the right thing because they're going to get a burst of energy. They're going to have a lot more activity, right? And you run that for 6 months, and push them over the edge. You can do some serious damage, and it's permanent damage. It's not like you're going to fix it, right? So running toxic levels on vitamins is pretty crazy.
So, one of our friends of the show in Canada sent me a picture of a feed tag, and he said, "This is all we get: crude protein, fat, fiber, calcium, sodium, A, D, and E vitamins. That's it."
Yep. Yep.
And there's a liability disclaimer on it that says individual results from the use of this product may vary due to management, environment, genetics, blah, 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 blah. Therefore, the manufacturer or distributor does not warrant or guarantee individual results. Wow.
I haven't
So,
seen that disclaimer in Canada yet, but I like it. I like
I
it.
mean, I'm looking at it right here. I can forward this to you. It's that's crazy. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but I don't want a disclaimer like that on my feed, because if the person that made it is afraid of it to the point that they put a disclaimer on it, they're probably not feeding it to their birds.
Well, okay. Hold on a second, because the disclaimer you may want to consider.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be on the tag or the bag, but if they're using a feed from you that I've developed, right? If they're using the perfect chick starter or whatever, right, or the Gamefowl conditioner that you've got, look, I've got it at the peak numbers. I don't add anything because we've had some dumbasses try and add red cell to, those existing feed formulas thinking they're going to make, great better. No, you go in the wrong direction. You're gonna push them over that edge, right? And you're going to end up with a mess. So
Oh yeah,
that shit don't
I actually
work.
had a guy that said his birds seemed like they were burning up feeding the feed, and I was like, "What do you mean? It's designed for the birds. What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, the powder and stuff that they leave in their cup. I've been mixing red cell with it." I said, "So you took a feed that has the correct amount of vitamins, and to make it where they would eat the fines, you fed or added a supplement that was designed for a horse. And you want to know why their feathers look like they stuck their finger in a light socket?" I said, "Think about that for a minute."
Yeah.
The guy didn't reply.
Yeah. Don't buy feed from Gary or me and add anything to it, right? I got it all in there, right? Got it all in there.
I mean, if it's got grit in it, it's got it all. Can using cheap feed impact fertility and hatch rates?
It always does, right? I mean, it always does. Chick vigor, hatch rates. Now, the saving grace to Gamefowl is oftentimes the hens are free ranging a fair bit. I've seen on the yards that I've walked, I'll see hens have access to more free ranging. So the hens that are free ranging will still have really good hatch rates and hatchability and good chick vigor. But if they're cooped up being fed, cheap feed, then no, you're probably still going to get 70 or 80%. But most of the guys that, I get feedback from are 90 to 100% hatch rates, right? Like we're banging out 11 to 12 or something like that, hatching out. So,
can poor feed lower show performance?
yeah. Yeah.
So what you're telling me is a professional athlete doesn't go eat a Big Mac before they go get in the ring with Mike Tyson?
Not that I know of. I mean, I'm not saying it never happened, but I don't think the guy won, so.
All right.
Those guys are on really strict diets and, they're managing those carbs right up until the last minute. They're doing a little bit of carbing, but it's timed out almost perfectly. I had a nephew who was extremely athletic and, he would watch his clock and he knew what time he had to perform and the whole bit. And, then he knew when to, get those carbs into his system, and he had really good timing. And that's what these athletes are doing. The ones that feel the need to carb load, they know exactly when, to dump those carbohydrates into their system, to give them that energy burn, through that endurance race. But depending on which type of exhibition, guys are performing in, sometimes you only need 2 minutes. Sometimes you only need 5 minutes. Sometimes you need an hour. So it depends, do you really need carb loading or not? So you have to decide that on your own. Me personally, I'm not a fan of carb loading, but guys like it, guys do it. I'm not going to change that. So
I've always said
have them. I want the bird being more of a keto diet where it's, it's burning, it's getting its energy from fats, right? And it's a continual burn, right? And it's there, and having just the right amount of fat on the bird going into the exhibition, right? Because I think the release of the energy of that is much more consistent. It's not hills and valleys of energy. It's not like, boom, it goes up, it ramps up really fast. If you miss the timing, and this is like you and I eating Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner, right? You ramp up your carbs too fast. When you come down the other side, you go below where you started and you end up taking a nap on the couch. Okay. So, whereas when you're burning fat, from ketos, um, that's much more level and consistent and easier to manage. I'm not saying that the carbs don't work, but hitting your timing just right is, to me, if you don't know the metabolism of that bird, trying to hit that energy level just right can be tough, right? So that's my 2 cents worth.
I've always said if you have to drag it out, you didn't raise your bird right. All right, this is a very important question, and we're coming down, like we're out of time. How do you know your birds are underfed nutritionally? How can you look at a bird and tell? What are the signs?
I'm looking at, I always start with the eyes, right? So I'm looking to see how the eyes set. If a bird, the eye alertness, the eye clarity, that's an early sign, right? If I'm hitting like the vitamin levels, I'm looking to see if it's set in or out. How does the eye sit in the socket? Is it dehydrated or not? Then I'm looking at, the feather quality, feather shine, and then I'm looking at leg color, things like that. And I really always like to look at the chicken's poop, and the chicken shit will show me a whole lot. So,
I mean, we did an episode on that.
yeah.
Also, look at the comb and the wattles. If they haven't been dubbed yet, if they're not like, I got a bottle of ketchup sitting here. If they're not ketchup red, or if they're not like the color of this red, then there's a deficiency. What's the best advice for saving money on feed that you can give?
I'm the wrong person to ask, because you know what? You always feed the absolute best that you can afford. And what I find is there's guys holding on to way too many birds. They're feeding too many birds, hoping that, this stag is going to turn into something when it matures. And the chances of it, once it gets past 6 months old, if it's been raised right, once it gets past 6 months old, there are attributes like its personality that are going to change. But if you don't like the way that bird looks and the way it's put together, like you don't like its stance or its conformation or, station, things like that, or tail set or whatever, right? There's no need in feeding it to 2 years old, right? It's not going to magically turn into Arnold Schwarzenegger, just because you kept it longer. And so I think too many guys are keeping too many birds, hoping that they turn into something. And, the best guys listening to this show, and they've talked about it before, call early, call hard, right? And, you just don't accept, weaknesses early on. When you see those weaknesses, whether it's duck toe, curly toe, rye tail, right? All of those are going to play into the performance of the bird, right? So feed them as good as you can feed them. I mean, feed them better than you honestly think you can feed them, and call hard so that you're not feeding more than you have to. That's the way I go at it, right? Shit, I'm feeding my dog, ground beef and chicken, right? From a pasture raised farm out of Florida. Okay. So you want to talk about how much I'm feeding my dog, and it doesn't perform. She does a few tricks for me, but she doesn't. I'm not going to get any money back on her. So,
Man, that dog does tricks when she wants her peanut butter treat.
I know she does do tricks.
So this is a spreadsheet that calculates a lot of stuff that we talked about, and I'm just going to leave it up here right before we end the show. Breeder supplements, $52 is what Rapidos costs for a 10-pound bag. That makes it per ounce. Then we break it down to grams and how many grams per bird a day. And there's your cost per serving per bird. So if you look at that and a $25 feed together, you've got 15 cents into feeding it. You got a high quality bird, you got high quality feed that you're going to spend $35 for. Calculate the same math, no supplement, just the feed, and you're at 13 cents, 13. So take your common feed, add a supplement to it, or just get the more expensive feed. Kicking chicken, that's what you're going to spend a day. Nutri-Drench, Poultry Cell, Red Cell, all that stuff. Save a Chick, that should be renamed Salt in a Bag. Jitter Juice is a little expensive at 30 cents, but I'll say this. I have people calling all that times of the day. Hey, if I place an order now, how fast can you get it out?
Look, you don't feed it every day.
Mm-mm.
You shouldn't feed. You don't feed it every day. You use it when you need it. Okay, you're doing muscle repair with it. If you've overconditioned a bird and he's tight, muscles are tight, or you get some severe stress go through the yard, that's when you're using it. And you're not using it every day. It was never intended to be an everyday supplement.
No. And somebody put a question up that says, is kefir or buttermilk more beneficial?
Depends on what you want to do. They both have their purpose. So anytime, before the last 2 weeks before the show, in the last week of the show, I think the buttermilk wins. But any other time when you just want to straighten out their gut, give them a little bit of a boost, I think the kefir wins. Okay. So they each have their own purpose and place. But, in the last 5 to 7 days before the show, I'm going to go with buttermilk, a small amount. Don't get crazy with the buttermilk. You can go too far. Okay. Maybe like a teaspoon of buttermilk tops. Okay. Same way with the kefir. That stuff's loaded with probiotics, but they have two different kinds of probiotics. Never, ever use those two together. They are antagonistic, and you're going to just blow up the guts. You're going to get shit out of that chicken like you ain't never seen before in your life. Okay. So don't mix those. Right. They're doing two different things.
What's your take on mixing two separate feeds together? Like, say, a Caliente Gamefowl mix with a common poultry feed or all flock pellets?
I don't know. It's not great, Kiku. It's just not. I mean, you can do it, and there's plenty of guys who do it. I've seen that. I've seen guys, talk about doing that before, and it depends on where you're at and what you got available to you. If I was going to do it, I'd probably go with a good all flock, like up in that 20% all flock type range, not a layer pellet. And I'd go 2/3 all flock, 1/3 Caliente mix.
He said, I mean, they both could be lacking something, but say putting them together would compromise what's lacking. Probably not.
Probably not.
If you calculate the math, I mean, like if you got one lacking in methionine and you add 0.2 to 0.4, you're at 0.6, and then you divide by 2 to get the average, you're at 0.3. So you're pulling one down and not really doing a whole lot with the other.
Yeah.
Louis says Jeff Custom Mix actually saved me money versus Nutritional, Scratch, and Rapido. What about that time?
Yeah, everybody gives their time away, man. Nobody has a value on their time.
Like, to me though, do you want to spend hours a weekend mixing up feed in a barrel or a wheelbarrow or something like that? Or do you want to spend it working with your birds, training them, get them to do what you want them to do?
What else you got
here? Can you overdo it by adding the breeder supplement to a high quality feed? If you don't overdo the breeder supplement and actually follow the instructions, unless it's a formula that Jeff made himself, no.
I haven't seen an off-the-shelf feed that you can't add it to. But like Carrie just said, if it's one of my feed formulas you're getting through Carrie or, one of the other feed mills that I work with, there's no need to add it. I've got it covered. But if it's not, like I said, not one of my formulas, you're safe adding the breeder supplement to it.
Here's one that says, is a turkey pellet good for a conditioning feed mix?
I don't think so. Most turkey feeds are really high in protein, like really high. Like I would think most turkey feeds are either like 26, 28% protein or 24. And I think you're going to have too much protein. I think you're making the kidneys work harder than they need to be. Good conditioning feed is going to be 18%. As long as the amino acids are right. So I'm shooting for an 18%. And actually, if it's one of my formulas with all the right amino acids in it, probably a 16 or even a 17%. And my guys in Hawaii, they don't like the 18. It just a little bit too much for the birds. They prefer the 16 with corrected aminos.
All right, so we're going to end on that. Guys, we have gotten a lot of requests to do 2 different types of shows. So I'm going to ask y'all for some help. One of the shows that we have been asked for is housing and setup. What kind of shelters to use for different situations, how many square feet per bird, shade, trees, cover, tie cords, fly pins, all that good stuff. So what I would love for y'all to do is send me pictures of setups if you have questions or anything like that. Or if you don't have questions, just send me pictures of the setup so we can use them on the show.
And you're not going to use names. You're not going to use names and locations unless people tell you, it's okay. So
I was going to say, if you're okay with me sharing your name or your location, I'm going to need you to put in the text of the email, it's okay to share my info. If you don't put that in the email, it's going to be like a ghost sent it to me.
Yeah. No names, no locations.
Once I get the pictures, I will delete the emails. I'm going to put my email address on there. That I'm the only person that has access to that, except for my wife. She can unlock my phone. Also, we were getting a lot of requests to talk about keeps and show preparation. So we're going to try to put together a show on that and stay away from the sport as much as possible with that, because a lot of people really enjoy our show and we're not trying to get kicked off the internet. But we want to talk about some do's and some don'ts. So if you have some information that I could use for show notes for that, also send me an email and let me know that information. And Kitku, I will tell you this. We have talked to Frank and we have talked to Kenny, and they will talk to us about stuff, but y'all need to understand with where they are in the public's eye and the scrutiny that they already receive, the reason as to why they cannot come on the show. And you know, when I talked to Kenny and he explained it to me, I understand, because I mean, he lives in California. You know, coming on this show would be just like asking for a problem, and he doesn't want PETA or anybody else up his rear end, and I don't blame him. So if you have any questions for them directly, I would recommend you join that Bred to Perfection, and they do consultations, but publicly they're just like y'all. They're not coming out in the public and saying nothing. And that's the main reason why we try to stay out of and away from the sport as much as we absolutely can, because we don't want those problems. We try to keep it all about the continuation of the breed, maintaining and breeding better birds and better nutrition. You have anything to add on that one, Jeff?
No, you said it very well. But both have been contacted and discussions have been had about trying to have them on the show. And just, you know, some of the comments come in. Some guys just can't help themselves but talk about sport type comments. And
I mean, we actually had one of them say that they were seriously considering it because they like the show, but a lot of people will post comments that are very illicit about the sport, and they can't do that. They can't be involved. So
they're not going to do it.
Mm-mm. Either way, y'all have a good night, and we will see you next Monday, where hopefully we're able to talk about one of those two topics. Until then, keep crowing.